Sam, you've complained to me on multiple occasions that Europeans take their drinks without enough ice. Is that still your opinion on ice?
Adam, the only ice I want around is in my coffee.
So controversial for February.
Not here, dude. It is 80 degrees in San Diego. As you saw, I was at the dog beach over the weekend and rubbing it in your face.
That's true. It was sunny today, but it's projected to rain for the rest of the month. Not even snow. The rest of Europe gets snow, but not here. Never mind. We're not talking about a particularly light topic today. The news cycle has been dominated over the past month by immigration and custom enforcement's action, particularly in Minnesota, US state of Minnesota, where they are responsible for 2/3 of the murders that have happened in that state this year. The US government is responsible for 2/3 of the murders in Minnesota. So we're going to be running through that episode, this current episode in American history, looking at sort of what's going on there and looking at some of the ways that people are fighting back and trying to protect their communities from immigration and customs enforcement. I am sort of taking the lead a little bit on this one precisely because I'm not in the United States. So we're kind of looking at how it's been reported outside of the country a little bit. For our US listeners, perhaps you'll get a picture of what the rest of the world is thinking. And Sam, throughout this, I'm going to ask for your view on how things have been reported and your take from the inside, as it were. Sound good?
Well, I always appreciate your take on America, as it is quite objective to the facts while, keeping our extremely leftist views. But yeah, someone's got to counter the BBC.
Yeah, right. Well, I appreciate that, man. Let's start with a little bit of background. A lot of the protests, the ones that have been in the news recently, have focused on Minneapolis, which is the largest city in Minnesota. It's not the capital, that's St. Paul, but Minneapolis and St. Paul share a metropolitan area, often called the Twin
Cities.
Twin Cities, which is a cool name. It's a cool name.
Well, their baseball team is called the Twins.
Oh, didn't know that. That is fun. Now, Donald Trump's administration has posted a lot of immigration and customs enforcement agents to the Twin Cities and U.S. cities generally. In his second term, Donald Trump said he wanted to deport 20 million people from the United States. This is impossible. It's more than 5% of the population. He sent ICE agents to Los Angeles and then to Washington, D.C. We often hear ICE compared to the Gestapo, the Nazi Gestapo. Even Governor Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota and vice presidential nominee, he compared ICE to the Gestapo. As a historian, Sam, what do you think about that comparison?
First, I'd like to preface that I don't consider myself a historian because real historians are in the archives doing real work all the time. I'm just a student of history, I would say, and a teacher of history. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, I do think the comparison is very apt. And I think the scary part is when we think of Nazi Germany, we think of it all at once, right? We think of the highlight reel, as it were, or the low light reel. But if you look at the earlier days, it's very, very reminiscent to the now, and it seems to have happened faster here than there in terms of the organized violence by the state. So I don't think it's far-fetched to compare them to that. By the way, I was in D.C. recently when the National Guard was deployed, and that was very eerie in itself to see armed soldiers walking around everywhere. I do think ICE is a bit more threatening, surprisingly, than armed soldiers walking around, because soldiers have training and some form of discipline, whatever my own takes on the military are.
Yeah.
But ICE has I think I read today that it is 47 days of training total before they're sent out on the force. I used to complain about cops, because their training is roughly a year, 9 months, depending on your jurisdiction, but it takes more to be a hairstylist in the state of California.
Really? Wow.
Really. But that's an aside.
Yeah.
But that was all to say that ICE's training and the type of people that have joined ICE and the directives they have from the top, also the lack of accountability they have, is very scary.
Yeah, so they absolutely operate with a lack of accountability. And I really like what you said just then about how when we think of the Nazis, we think of it happening all at once. We think of it as like a single unit, but of course it developed over time. I bring that up because although it is tempting to compare them to the Gestapo, and this is a point of interest, really, I think comparison to Nazis are apt, but I think that a better comparison than the Gestapo would be to the Sturmabteilung, the SA. The Gestapo was the Nazi secret police, and actually they were kind of an outshoot of a much older organization. They went back to sort of the Prussians, before, like a pre-unified Germany had secret police in Prussia, and they were about intelligence gathering. And their job was to find and neutralize threats to the regime. They investigated political dissidents. They received supports from the Sicherheitsdienst, the security service. And that's kind of what ICE does. But what the Gestapo didn't do was go around beating up people in public, which the SA, the Sturmabteilung, did. They were effectively the thugs of the Nazi Party. During the Weimar era, it wasn't uncommon for political parties in Germany to sort of have their own paramilitary groups, and the SA was the paramilitary group of the Nazi Party. And then over time, as the Nazis became more ingrained into the state, the SA became more and more organized and were eventually kind of used as an auxiliary police and had the right to do whatever they wanted, basically. They were effectively state-sanctioned bullies.
So were they the ones that were hanging people in public and executing people in public during the war?
During the war, I don't know. That's a good question. I think that by the time the war rolled around, there were new organizations in place. Like eventually the SA was seen as too powerful. Their leader was assassinated in 1934 by Hitler because he saw them as a threat, and they were sort of replaced by the SS, the Schutzstaffel, and that was more an official part of the German state. I don't know if it was them who was executing people during wartime. But hopefully we won't come to, well, I suppose we're already there in a sense. I was going to say hopefully it won't come to that, but we are in a sense already there. Importantly, the SA were also not chosen for their intelligence, much like ICE agents.
Right.
I've seen rumors around that a lot of ICE agents, because ICE has really struggled with recruitment because they're so unpopular. And there are a lot of rumors that a lot of the people who were pardoned as part of the January 6th insurrection are now ICE agents.
Oh, I completely agree that is extremely plausible. Yeah. That I've heard a lot of rumors that background checks are not really required during the application process. There have been some reporters that have gone through the ICE recruiting stage, and some of them put that they had a criminal record. They put all this horrible stuff that should disqualify you from being able to be hired, but they did make it through the screening.
Wow. So are they Gestapo? SA is maybe more apt. Gestapo rolls off the tongue a little bit better, but they are state
thugs. They're state-sanctioned thugs. We can agree on that.
We can agree on that. So on the 4th of December, 2025, Operation Metro Surge was announced. Ostensibly, this was part of an immigration crackdown in Minneapolis, and 2,000 ICE agents were sent to the city. Really, if we're honest, or if the administration was honest, they would say it's because it's a Democrat city, and they want to intimidate Democrats. But part of the justification for the ICE presence in the city were reports about fraud linked to immigrant communities. Now, part of that was COVID fraud, claims of fraud over COVID expenses claimed by potentially immigrant communities. But the really big one was alleged fraud over Somali daycares. And lots of people were up in arms about Somali daycare fraud. Now, the timelines in this don't quite work out because the video which popularized the Somali daycare fraud conspiracy theory was posted on the 26th of December, which is after ICE had been posted to the city. But it did draw more attention to Minneapolis. Do you know anything about this story, the Somali daycare fraud story?
Yeah, I don't recall the content creator that posted it, but there are quite a lot of content creators like that particular person.
Yeah, he's called Nick Shirley.
Yeah, they're like these right-wing guys that really have the if you want to see the lack of critical thinking on display, just go look at right-wingers that are trying to do gotcha interviews around the country. And he's one of these guys, obviously funded by some right-wing backers, so he's got a big channel. And I didn't see this video until all the boomers and Gen X that watch Fox News and Newsmax were talking about Somalis and daycares. And I was like, what are they talking about? And I guess it was just a guy going around trying to solve this fraud issue and expose it, apparently. And the only clip I saw, though, was him going to a daycare that was closed at the time he went there. And he was like, it's the middle of the day. Why aren't they open? This is proof of fraud. And I know that is such a talking point. That's the talking point of the neo-Nazis and the right-wing white circles in America right now. Out here in California, too, people are talking about Somalis. There are no Somalis in San Diego, but that's what people are concerned about.
Well, and Joe Rogan started talking about it.
Yeah, that's probably why. Yeah, Joe Rogan picked it up, and I'm sure that's why all these 30-year-olds with trucks suddenly care about Somalis. But like I was saying, yeah, there's a lot of Ethiopians out here, but they're lovely. Their food's great.
I love Ethiopian food.
Local businesses.
Yeah.
But that's all I know about the case. I know the surface level because it was one of those instances where the more I looked into it, the more brain cells I felt just turning off in my head. And I was like, I need to pull back for my sanity.
Yeah, so you're right. Nick Shirley, he went to these daycare centers and it was closed. And he was like, and then he said, oh, this is closed. This is evidence of fraud. He went there during the winter break. It was the holidays that was closed, like how schools closed for vacation.
Yeah, like you said, it was posted on the 26th.
Yeah,
right?
and then he went to, in another part of the video, he went to ones which are open, and he went into the reception area of the daycare with his entourage, his crew, which were a group of masked men with video cameras, and said, "I'm here to see the children," and the daycare workers said no. Now. I don't know how...
I didn't see that part. That's
I don't know
crazy.
how things work in America, but I work in a school, right? And in order to be allowed to walk around the building without having someone accompany you at all times, you need background checks, right? You need to have a police background check, and if you've lived outside of the country for more than a few months, you need to get one from that country as well, and you need to get all of this evidence that needs to be approved in order to be given a pass. And even then, if you're just a visitor, you're still often a bit limited on where you can go. You don't get to go in just because you say you're a journalist and show up with some guys. That's not how it works.
Yeah. I mean, my first job ever was at a Boys and Girls Club, which I don't know if they have that in the UK. I know it's in a few other countries.
Is it like the Scouts?
It's like YMCA.
Oh.
It's like after school sort of daycare activities.
We had an equivalent of that, yeah.
Nonprofit for low income kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing the after school stuff and the summer break stuff, and you're absolutely right that that front desk is pretty sacred at these places where you can't just let people back to see the kids. Yeah. You need the people coming to pick up the kids need to be on file as like the legal guardian or approved by the legal guardians. And you definitely can't film kids without their parents' permission. Like, even if you work there, right?
Yeah. So this is where that conspiracy came from. Now, I did look into if there was any daycare fraud. And according to the Louisiana Illuminator, which is a news organization I've never heard of, but did do reporting on this.
Sounds prestigious.
Yeah. There was around $5 million of what was called like inconsistent payments, which might mean fraud, or it might mean there was some like administrative error and the payments were counted wrong, or someone was charged in error, or something like that. It was about $5 million.
You know what it also could mean in a low income community, which I have seen, is someone looks the other way 1 month when the parent can't afford it.
Sure. Yeah. And so that is a far cry from the more than $1 billion in fraud claimed by the acting U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, Joseph Thompson, or, if I remember right, Joe Rogan claiming $2 billion. So the difference between the discrepancies reported by the officials and the actual discrepancies is about $1 billion.
No, not an insignificant amount.
Not an insignificant amount. Now, Trump nevertheless used this as justification to cut childcare funding in Democrat cities, not just in Minnesota. And actually, in all of the, despite all of the claims of fraud for ICE agents, of the 3,000 people that ICE claims to have arrested in Minneapolis, only 23 were Somali, and of those, none worked in social services or childcare.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a casus belli, it was pretty transparent.
Well, most Somali Americans are that. They're Somali Americans. They're citizens.
Right.
Most are born here, right?
Yeah.
It was just they're very different from what you'd think of Trump's version of the American culture.
Yeah.
So they seemed an easy target.
Exactly. So ICE agents were sent in. Tim Walz, again, Democratic governor of Minnesota, claimed that this was a war being waged on Minnesota, and it does certainly look like an occupation. Shout out to the Hampton Inn Lakeview Hotel, who refused to house ICE agents and were dropped by the Hilton Group, of which they were a franchise for that purpose.
Wow.
Yep, shout out to them. If you are in Minneapolis, maybe stay at the Hampton Inn Lakeview Hotel. And ICE started fucking shit up immediately. On the 6th of December, around a dozen federal agents entered a home in Burnsville, arrested 4 people, including the parents of a 7-year-old boy. They were taken to detention facilities outside the state. On December 9th, a 55-year-old resident who was a U.S. citizen was detained by federal immigration agents whilst observing ICE action on the street. And he asked an ICE agent, she asked an ICE agent, "Are you ICE?" and was recording, and was immediately tackled to the ground, handcuffed, and taken into custody. She was transported to a federal building and held for several hours. This is not illegal, but there is a broader pattern of ICE agents arresting people who are documenting what they're doing. And of course, there was the case of Liam Ramos, a 5-year-old boy who was essentially kidnapped by ICE as bait in order to arrest his father. They have now both been released, but took a while.
And he's the one that J.D. Vance jumped in to say they did the right thing. As a father of a 5-year-old,
yeah,
I wouldn't leave him in the cold, he said.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, as an American citizen, how does it feel to hear this?
It feels unsurprising to me because I think you and I had conversations in 2024 when Trump was promising these mass deportations, and I was like, dude, the people here don't know what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is extremely violent. Like, if it's feasibly going to be done, then it's going to get really Gestapo-style violence in America. And I told that to other people here, too, and no one seemed to believe that was a possibility. But here we are, right? This is what fulfilling a promise of deporting millions looks like. And they're not even close to their goal, right? So, yeah.
Now, Minnesotans have, as it turns out, good political organization and weren't going to take this lying down. Have you heard much about Ice Watch?
I have. Actually, I saw my first Ice Watch video I saw was in Minneapolis last year, so that maybe that was one of the reasons for the targeting now as like a retribution. But I see that it's citizens rallying around and warning other citizens of their whereabouts. And we have that around here too. There's certain Instagram accounts in San Diego that are constantly posting of potential ICE or confirmed ICE. And sadly, sometimes like post-ICE incidents where there'll be just a car, like a truck running with like a lawnmower in the back and someone's hat and sunglasses left on the seat and their phone left on the seat. They're like, oh, if this is your father, like come get his car. Like they just left it in the street. Because as you've seen, they don't clean up their messes, right?
Yeah.
They just think about how much paperwork it takes to tow a car by the police.
Yeah.
And they just, it's so wild. That's the part that's baffling to me is how extrajudiciary they are on every single level.
Yeah.
Not just in their violent action, but just in their like disruption of the cities they're in, right?
Yeah, so that is true, and that is part of what Ice Watch does. Ice Watch is not one organization. There are lots of organizations that carry out this work, but it is, like you say, following around ICE and alerting people to their presence. I saw a very chilling video of a residential street in Minneapolis, and it was like kind of near sunset, and there was lots of snow everywhere. The camera was panning, and you couldn't see anyone in camera, but you could hear from a few streets away people yelling, "They're here! They're here! Go inside! They're here!" And dozens of voices shouting that. It was really very, very chilling.
Yeah.
There's a very good article about it in, of all places, Teen Vogue. I'll link it in the description, but Teen Vogue wrote a really good article about what Ice Watch is and how to start your own Ice Watch group.
Hey, woke is back. You predicted it last episode.
I did. Woke is back.
Also, a brief aside, the Grammys also proved that in that, all wearing the pins again.
Yeah.
Don't really know what to say other than that. And Jelly Roll squirming as he tried to explain he has no idea what's going on and what people are talking about. Woke is back, baby.
We are so back. So yeah, there are signal chats where people warn each other about ice stings. There are mutual aid networks building up where people get groceries for people who are afraid to leave their home for fear of being kidnapped by ICE. Somali Americans in particular have brought tea and snacks to protesters in Minneapolis. And the big strategy, of course, is to follow and film ICE agents, which is entirely legal. But the Trump administration has responded by murdering these people. On the 7th of January, René Good, a 37-year-old poet, writer, and mother of 3, was murdered by Immigration and Customs Enforcement Officer Jonathan Ross. You've all probably seen the video. She had just dropped off her child at school, where ICE were conducting an operation. Her last words were, "That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you." She started to reverse and then drive away from Jonathan Ross, who stood in front of her car. And then Ross shot her in the head, calling her a fucking bitch. Kristi Noem said that René Good perfectly fit the definition of a domestic terrorist. She wasn't the first person to be killed by ICE. Since July 2025, at least 8 ICE in the street and at least 35 have died in their concentration camps. And these are just the ones that we've heard about. Now, it's hard to hear, it's hard to say, it's hard to see. This understandably sparked outrage. It resulted in a citywide general strike.
And this is where we landed in our mid-year or our start of the year podcast from last episode. This was the point where we recorded. So the events to come had not yet happened, though we did predict ICE would kill someone else in Minneapolis. We did say it would probably be a Somali American, but which hopefully doesn't happen still. But what happened next was, I guess, part right on your bingo card, which is horrifying to say. We're not happy that the bingo card is being filled out.
It was not a cheerful bingo card.
No.
We'll talk a little bit about the general strike first. You might, long-time listeners of the show might remember that we credited a general strike for helping to bring about the end of communism in Czechoslovakia, and that strike only lasted a few hours. This was America's first general strike in more than 80 years. Protesters called it the Day of Truth and Freedom. Hundreds of small businesses closed. 50,000 people marched through Minneapolis, which is impressive numbers given that it was minus 29 degrees Celsius or minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Like, that is so insanely cold, and yet 50,000 people were out there marching together. I want to know, Sam, how was this reported in the US? It wasn't very well reported in Europe. I came across it because I look out for this stuff, but whilst everyone in Europe heard about René Good's murder, I don't think a lot of people would have heard about the general strike.
No, I didn't know the general strike was happening until the day it happened, and I only found out about the protests as well at that point because Hassan Piker was there marching with them. But that's the only outlet I saw out there. There wasn't really... There was a lot of coverage on the aftermath, as we'll see, but... like the general strike itself and the march, there was not a lot of reporting coming out. I mean, we live in a very techno-feudal society already, so who knows if the algorithms were just suppressing that information. I know that you couldn't search for Minneapolis on, I want to say, there was a few sites you couldn't search for Minneapolis on that day. TikTok might have been one. I think Instagram was for a bit, and they said it was an error when people pointed it out.
Funny error.
And then, of course, the bastion of free speech, X.
Yeah, free speech absolutism. That's interesting, and perhaps not surprising that it wasn't reported very well. Now, as you've said, kind of hit this one on the bingo card, because on the 24th of January, 2026, as if in response to the general strike, it was in fact the very next day, following the strike, ICE executed Alex Pretti. He was also 37, and he was a nurse at the State Department of Veteran Affairs Hospital. Which,
if you don't know a lot about the VA, it's a incredibly understaffed and ill-funded organization. It's supposed to serve veterans that have served overseas, but everyone I know that's ever worked at a VA just expresses how frustrating it is to work there because the government does not care about serving these veterans. But Alex was one of those people that did his best to serve the veterans in Minneapolis.
That's a shame and a little bit surprising, because my impression was that this is one of the most popular public institutions in the United States. It seems like everyone is a big fan of the VA.
They're a fan of its existence, but everyone I've talked to that's had to actually get treatment there knows.
I see.
Really going on.
Well, I'm sure we've all seen this video too. Pretti was tackled to the floor by an ICE officer. He had several officers holding him down. He was pepper sprayed first, and an ICE agent emptied his magazine into Pretti. His last words were directed to a woman who had also been pushed down by ICE, and they were, "Are you okay?" Pretti was shot 10 times in 5 seconds.
You say that you're sure we've all seen this, but actually the angle you probably saw fairly quickly is an angle that is very hard to find on
Really?
On
the one from across the street?
That one is one we've seen across the street in the donut shop. There's one you can see a woman in that video that is pretty close to the action. And I guess that was the video that was shown mostly in Europe and in Asia, pretty much around the world. But in the U.S., not a single news organization has used that footage, not even like censoring it at certain points.
Interesting. Didn't know that. The killers were identified on the 1st of February as Jesus Ochoa and Raimundo Gutierrez in a dark irony.
Well, you're talking to the guy that lives in San Diego and is half Mexican. I mean, you see it especially, like, Border Patrol around here is a pretty Hispanic staffed organization historically around here. And there is kind of a saying, at least in the Mexican community, but it's basically no one hates Mexicans more than other Mexicans. and people have been saying that, but just no one hates Latinos more than other Latinos.
Yeah. A spontaneous protest emerged pretty quickly. Around 100 people gathered, calling federal agents cowards, told them to go home. And one officer mockingly responded with, boo-hoo.
And they got tear gassed immediately, right?
Yes.
I saw a video of a bookshop owner who's 72 who was out there in the cold yelling at the ICE agents. Yeah. So I wish I had that in front of me, but shout out to that bookshop.
Yeah.
Always support your local bookstores.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important. We always stand local bookstores. Sam, what do you think the purpose of these killings was?
I think ICE and the Trump administration feel very vulnerable based on how the general public has responded to their actions in these cases. And I think when you're feeling vulnerable and outnumbered, you resort to intimidation factors. So I think, the administration knew some killings would happen. And I think they were okay with that calculus because they see it as an intimidation factor. They want people to be afraid of ICE. And I think ICE agents want that shield of fear as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of the killings themselves, I think what shook most people, both lib and leftists alike, was that the people that were killed were kind of just doing what most of us would do in that situation. They were filming them. If I saw that happening, I would definitely be in the same situation. So just to know that my life is in danger by just being a community member is very scary.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not scared of ICE, and I don't think other people are either. I think it's evident what they are. They're cowards.
They are. I think you're right that they feel vulnerable. Adrian Dobb has made the claim. I see a similar claim reflected in a book I'm reading right now called Monsters by Claire Dederer, which is about how we should think about art made by people who turn out to be terrible people. And it's the claim that white supremacists in particular, but people with varying sort of far-right beliefs, believe that secretly everyone feels like they do. They believe that were it not for woke culture or liberal sensibilities, that actually everyone would agree with them. And that once they started marching out on the streets, once they started executing people, once they started deporting everyone they could, that people would be able to free themselves of this sort of shackles of their liberal sensibility and they'd be welcomed like heroes. Maybe they'd be welcomed like you see in a movie, like the ragtag group of gruff heroes who work outside the law.
Like Red Dawn vibes.
But that's not the case. Instead, you've seen, as you say, community members displaying immense courage and far more courage than the ICE agents or indeed any kind of national governance displaying. State level, you're seeing some people work. Local level, you're seeing people work, but not at the national level, really. The killing of Alex Pretti and René Good before him made ICE even less popular than they already were. Protests erupted across the US. Last Saturday, January 31st, there were more than 300 across the US. 5 people were arrested in Los Angeles. Students walked out of classes in Redondo Beach, California, and Austin, Texas.
Oh, they've been walking out everywhere.
Oh.
They walked out here locally. There were a lot of students that...
A lot of students walking out. Interesting.
I will say that these protests, the news about them has been kind of hard to find. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I wanted to go see where people were kind of rallying to locally because, I mean... My frustration as an American protester is that we don't have a big square in the middle of every town that everyone just goes and expresses their their discontent at. We all have to like drive to some building or a park or wherever, and it changes quite a lot.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
And I didn't see any news of. I didn't see any of the accounts that were posting about gatherings until after they had happened, which I'm sure was a suppression technique from like Instagram and the likes. But I think there were a lot more people that wanted to go that couldn't find where people were gathering.
I think signal groups is a good way to do that. You need to find some signal groups.
I don't know how to find signal groups, but that's because they're intentionally hard to find, right?
Yeah, that's true. Throughout the streets of Minneapolis, a huge Constitution was being walked through the streets. Bruce Springsteen sang there, streets of Minneapolis. Another campaign, which the Lakeview Hotel was a part of, is Don't Serve ICE. ICE is finding it hard to get served in restaurants and hotels and bars and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And Adam Conover, who is a internet personality and union negotiator, he made a video about the protests where he noted that now the top post of all time on r/catbongos, a subreddit where you use your cat's bum as a drum, is an anti-ICE post saying ICE not welcome here. And then other people started posting anti-ICE videos. There was an amazing one that he shared in his video of someone using their cat's bum as a drum to play the Internationale. And that was a very popular post.
Nice.
A majority of Americans now disapprove of how Trump handled immigration, is handling immigration, 53%, despite that being the main issue on which he ran. Democrats and Republicans are backpedaling on ICE. Greg Bovino, a tiny Nazi who was a part of Border Patrol, not Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but was still kind of the face of ICE. He was sacked and replaced by Tom Homan.
So Bovino's the one taking the fall, basically.
Bovino's taking the fall, exactly. And Tom Tillis, a Republican senator, said that ICE had fucked up. Even Stephen Miller has changed his tune a little bit, going from saying that Pretti was a domestic terrorist to saying that ICE may not have followed protocol, which is about as...
might not have followed protocol.
Which, as backpedaling goes, is not much, but, you know, he's not sticking to his guns as hard as he was. Sam, we've talked before about how protests in America can sometimes feel like angry parades. Does it still feel that way?
I think from what I see in Minneapolis, no. I think... in other parts of the country, perhaps it kind of depends. I think the response to ICE in particular is a lot of really brave people that are trying to network as fast as they can and community organize where the roots weren't there before. And perhaps what we'll see out of this is a lot more groups of like-minded people politically that were not previously banded together before this whole situation. At least that's what I'm hoping for, because grassroots organizing in America is usually hard to come by compared to some other countries, on the left at least.
Yeah. Well, that's something hopeful, I think.
By the way, have you ever seen an ICE ad before we go on to the more hopeful
No, I didn't know
stuff?
they had ads.
Oh, they do, but I actually anticipated you'd ask me about this.
Okay.
Ask if I'd ever seen one.
Oh, no, I didn't know they existed.
They're extremely targeted.
Okay.
So they're a main sponsor of the UFC now.
Of course.
So if you're watching a UFC pay-per-view, including in the UK, you'll see the ads. Their tagline is "Defend the Homeland."
Oh God.
And it's like they do the ads there, and then they advertise likewise on like Newsmax and the right-wing internet shows and on Fox. But other than that, like, I've never seen one served to me. I stopped watching the UFC a long time ago. They do have ads on YouTube that I have seen when I'm just watching whatever that pop up and jump scare me because it's Kristi Noem, and it's like a runway with people in shackles, and she's like, if you're an illegal immigrant, this is your future.
Oh, God.
So they're really trying the intimidation factor. They're trying to recruit where they know their bases, which is, uneducated white people.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's working to the effect they think it is.
Wow, that's good. I don't get YouTube ads because I have a VPN set to Albania, where YouTube ads are illegal.
Oh, I did not know
Top
that.
tip for the listeners.
Why have you not told me that before?
I only found out recently. It's a godsend.
Feel free to use that on our YouTube. We don't get paid at all for it. So.
That's horrifying, and I'm going to watch one of these videos. Now, despite some climb downs from the Trump administration, it's not clear that they've learnt their lesson. They do seem spooked, but Bovino's replacement, Tom Homan, said on the news he wants to make a database of protesters to make them famous, quote unquote. And given the intermingling of Palantir and the US government, that doesn't seem impossible.
They already have it.
They already have it, sure.
I'm sure.
Just today, the 4th of February, Homan announced that 700 ICE officers would be leaving Minneapolis, which Tim Waltz reported as a good move, but not enough, basically. So we'll see how things go.
The disgusting part is that the government was using this as a negotiating chip.
Yeah.
Right? They went to Minneapolis' state government and said, if you hand over your voter data, we will leave.
Wow.
Which is just, I don't know if you heard that, but that, yeah, so that was declined.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, but the implications of them doing those dealings means that's happening behind the scenes in other states, and that's horrifying, especially as a midterm election's coming up this year, as, a general election coming up in a couple of years. I don't believe we'll vote our way out of this.
No, me neither.
But a lot of people do.
Well, that kind of brings me to our conclusion. Sam, in the last episode, you said that it feels like there is a Soviet Union-sized hole in geopolitics right now.
For sure.
And no matter what you think of the Soviet Union, it was an effective counterbalance. It was resulting in a lot of social safety programs happening in Europe, for example, and even the US. The other big world power, China, seems unwilling to play that role. And this time, there's no one coming to save us. There is no allied force that looks like it's going to invade the Nazis. We have to save ourselves. And I think that that's what the people of Minneapolis have been doing through mutual aid networks, through protesting, through supporting each other. We're going to do an episode soon on mutual aid and how to understand it and maybe how to get involved in it. But to our listeners and to you, Sam, that is my challenge for you. Look up your local mutual aid groups and see if you can find a way to get involved. I will be doing that here. I've been involved in one in the past. I'm not currently, and it's a wonderful thing to do, to feel a part of your community and to help look after the people around you and build the world that we want to see.
Yeah, I think we'll see that as an overarching project for ourselves this year.
Yeah, for sure. Any final thoughts before we conclude?
We outnumber them, not just in our physical bodies, but in our mindset. And that if you are listening somewhere in a community where you feel isolated and alone because you're the only one that sees ICE as monsters, just know that most of the world is with you.
Thanks, Sam. That's beautiful and important to hear. Thank you for listening, dear listener. Keep looking out for each other and keep fighting the good fight. Rather than end with a quote and our rock and roll music, to end, I'm going to read René Nicole Good's prize-winning poem on learning to dissect fetal pigs. I want back my rocking chairs, solipsist sunsets, and coastal jungle sounds that are the tercets from cicadas and pentameter from the hairy legs of cockroaches. I've donated Bibles to thrift stores. mashed them in plastic trash bags with an acidic Himalayan salt lamp, the post-baptism Bibles, the ones plucked from street corners from the meaty hands of zealots, the dumbed-down, easy-to-read parasitic kind. Remember the more slick rubber smell of high-gloss biology textbook pictures. They burned the hairs inside my nostrils, and salt and ink that rubbed off on my palms. Under clippings of the moon at 2:45 a.m. I study and repeat ribosome, endoplasmic, lactic acid, stamen at the IHOP on the corner of Powers and Stetson Hills. I repeated and scribbled until it picked its way and stagnated somewhere I can't point to anymore. Maybe my gut, maybe there, between my pancreas and large intestine, is the piddly brook of my soul. It's the ruler by which I reduce all things, now hard-edged and amp-splintering knowledge that used to sit a cloth against fevered forehead. Can I let them both be, this fickle faith and this college science that heckles from the back of the classroom? Now, I can't believe that the Bible and Quran and Bhagavad Gita are sliding long hairs behind my ear like Mom used to, and exhaling from their mouths make room for wonder. All my understanding dribbles down the chin onto the chest and is summarized as: life is merely to ovum and sperm, and where those two meet, and how often, and how well, and what dies there.